Singapore Airlines. British man dies after flight from London hit by turbulence. And we will get the latest on that with Simon Calder, travel editor for The Independent and travel expert. Hello, Simon. How are you?
Fee, awful news. I mean, we've heard many times before of clear air turbulence and passengers getting hurled around and suffering bad injuries, but to have a loss of life is really, really serious. And of course, condolences to the family of the deceased and thoughts with the people who are injured. This sounds like a horrible ordeal for everybody, but unfortunately, it's, if you like, proof that aviation, in terms of reducing the number of crashes, has been incredibly successful. And I think attention will now focus on what actually happens in the cabin and whether there should be different protocols in place after this incident and what more can be done. I mean, looking on the Times website, you can see some extraordinary images of what the inside of the aircraft looks like, with all kinds of panels falling off and so on. And clearly the accident investigators will be very much looking at what can be learned from this. Meanwhile, it's just one of those awful things. The aircraft was about 90 minutes out of Singapore, so therefore the crew have been serving breakfast, people moving around, going to the washroom and so on. And so sadly, even if everyone was doing the right thing when they were seated, which is keeping their seatbelt fastened, there would have been a lot of activity at the time, which explains the high number of injuries. I'm seeing reports of over 50 people injured, some of them critically, very sadly.
And Simon, how common is this level of turbulence?
Well, there are incidents of clear air turbulence on average, where it is serious enough for somebody to be injured. Actually, about every 11 hours. I'm speaking to you from Seoul in South Korea. My flight out here hit some turbulence just passing Beijing in China. It was absolutely very, very sudden. The plane suddenly lurched, and as a result of that, sadly, somebody was injured. They called for medical assistance and somebody was able to care for the person, who fortunately wasn't too badly injured. But there's some talk that the incidences of turbulence are rising as a result of climate change. And clearly, if that is happening, that's a serious concern, and there needs to be some lessons learned. I mean, more widely, the chances of any aircraft actually being downed as a result of turbulence is, from all the people I've spoken to, effectively nil. And there are reports which I think are a bit wide of the mark. One of them saying that the aircraft dropped 5,000 feet in 2 minutes. I've had a look at the available public sources for what happened to the aircraft. It appears to have descended quickly after the incident and changed course, and they made clearly a very sudden decision to divert to the nearest major airport, which was Bangkok. But it descended about 6,000 feet in 8 minutes, which is actually quite reasonable. They did manage to get the aircraft on the ground very quickly, and of course that meant that the injured were able to get treatment ahead of faster than they would have done if they'd landed elsewhere or indeed continued to Singapore.
I suppose the thing that might surprise people, Simon, is that in our era of very advanced technology, how a pilot or air traffic control cannot actually predict what level of turbulence might be experienced by a plane flying into a certain weather condition. I mean, is that always going to evade us?
Well, we're getting smarter and smarter at these things. I mean, there are very obvious sources of turbulence, like thunderstorms, which are fortunately very easy to identify and which pilots will avoid, exactly to avoid the very sudden and severe updrafts and downdrafts which cause so much injury. Clear air turbulence is very simply just, you can almost sort of think of it perhaps as an air pocket into which the aircraft will fall or indeed very sudden severe upward pressure. Now, you're not actually going to be, it feels really scary, absolutely. And I sympathize with all the passengers who've ever experienced it, but you're not actually moving very far. It's just that normal stable flight is so smooth that clearly it's alarming. And yes, after this, there will be more talk about, are there better ways of identifying clear air turbulence than what tends to happen at the moment, which is that a pilot experiences it and radios all the people behind him and around just to say, watch out, there's a lot of turbulence there. And at least in that way, everybody can get strapped in and ready. And of course, it goes without saying that if you're told to strap in, you absolutely should.
Simon, thank you very much. Safe travels to you. Amanda is just one of our listeners who has taken the time to look at the photographs of the interior of the plane and does agree that they are horrendous, and they really are. To have been on that plane whilst those panels were all flying around and bits and pieces were coming towards you must have been a really, really difficult experience.